No, I don't.
Good afternoon.
You're out of
Bill?
uniform, Mr. Secretary.
Pardon?
You're out of uniform. Where's your Penn State bow tie?
Well, I want to try to maintain at least the appearance of seriousness because of out of my respect for you, and I felt that if I came up here looking as if I weren't taking this seriously, it would cast aspersions on the audience as well as on me.
You do see why I'm asking the question, don't you?
I do. I'd like to start with a brief announcement. As you know, we deployed the National Media Pool on Monday to go to Latin America to cover an operation called Laser Strike, which is a counter-narcotics operation that we are conducting with a number of other countries. There have been some misguided and I would say almost hysterical media reports out of Panama about this deployment, suggesting that it might have something to do with the domestic law enforcement operation now going on in Panama. It does not. These 13 journalists were deployed to Panama yesterday. They are still there, and they will go on to another country, Peru, early tomorrow morning to follow the counter-narcotics operations which are being assisted and supported by U.S. forces operating out of the Southern Command. I just want to give you a sense of why we did this and what they'll be covering. We did this obviously because we want to exercise the National Media Pool at least once a year, just to make sure that our systems and your systems are tuned and that it's ready to go when it needs to be. This is a fairly interesting operation. Last fall we had an operation called Green Clover, in which we cooperated with Peru and Colombia to provide air surveillance, radar tracking, etc., to interdict narco traffickers. And the operation worked very well, but what we learned was that by increasing air surveillance, we were just forcing the traffic down to the ground. So this is a much broader operation that involves about half a dozen countries rather than 2 countries, and it involves it involves air, naval, riverine, and ground operations. People from Southcom are, as I said, assisting and supporting law enforcement operations from the Latin American countries who are actually working to capture narco traffickers or interdict supplies. So they are going down into Peru, and they will spend their time on the ground and following riverine operations for the next couple of days, and will report back through the standard pool mechanism, which is now on the internet and will be available to you all. So the important thing is that it has nothing to do with any domestic law enforcement operation currently going on in Panama. It focuses entirely on Operation Laser Strike, and they will be located in Peru once they finish their briefings at Howard Air Force Base. Yeah, Suzanne?
Can I ask why that wasn't made clear last night in the call-outs?
Well, I can't tell you why it wasn't made clear in the call-outs, but there's certainly been no lack of clarity in our mind about this.
I can't read your mind.
Well, I think that every reporter but one seemed to understand what was going on and not make the, as I said, somewhat hyperbolic and outrageous connections that were made in one report. And everybody else seemed to get it okay. So I just want to be absolutely clear. I just want to be...
There was no definition made of what countries they were going to. And when detailed questions were asked, there were no answers given. So if there were any hyperbolic or hysterical reports, it wasn't made clear by the Pentagon what the pool was doing.
I'm making it clear now.
Thank you.
So I apologize if there was confusion earlier on. Tammy?
How many DoD personnel are participating in the operation, and do you have any breakdown?
There are several hundred American personnel participating in it, and I don't have a breakdown by service, no.
Why specifically Peru, vice, say, Colombia?
Well, there are a number of countries involved. These people, the media pool just happens to be going to watch an operation we're supporting in Peru as part of Operation Laser Strike. They, at another time in the operation, they might have gone somewhere else, but this just happens to be where they were directed this time.
Do we know how long the pool will be activated?
They will be back at the end of the week on Friday. Yes.
Could you give us about the operation, bigger background, how many countries exactly what are doing, about the operation totally?
Well, I'm not going to give you as much detail as you want. It's an ongoing operation. There are about half a dozen countries, and the U.S. role is to provide support and assistance. It's some training, some technical support. We're assisting law enforcement authorities in these half a dozen countries to help them track and follow, and then on their own interdict narco-trafficking. As I said, the important change in this operation from one that we ran last fall was that this is not just in the air, it's multidimensional. It's on the ground, it's at sea, and it's also in rivers. So it's a much more comprehensive attempt to work with local countries than the earlier one.
Did you move Army personnel to these countries to help them on the ground?
Well, people move in and out. The way Southcom operates, they have teams that go down and help people, train people, instruct them, provide technical assistance. I don't know enough about this to be able to tell you how long they're stationed with these people. My sense is they move in and out in teams. And it's what we would call in military terms, a multi-phased operation. So there are times when we would concentrate on maritime interdiction, and other times we might be concentrating more on ground interdiction or air interdiction. But the idea is to sort of mesh all of these operations as often as possible so that we provide a fairly complete screen. Yes.
Ken, we're told that laser strike actually began in April.
That's right.
Why was this particular moment picked to activate the pool and send them down? And secondly, do you have any feeling for how long laser strike will be in operation?
I don't think it has I don't believe that it has a firm end date at this stage. You're absolutely right. It's been going on since April, and it's been no secret. There have been fairly major articles about laser strike in the Los Angeles Times. It's been mentioned from this briefing stand by Brian Sheridan and others, I believe so, and it was certainly mentioned in connection with the trip the Secretary took to Latin America in the spring. So why did we choose this particular time to deploy the pool? It just seemed to be a time that worked out well for the people in Southcom and for the planners here. I don't think there's any magic to this. It just, the plans came together for this time. These things take some, the whole point of the media pool, of course, is so it can be deployed immediately if there's a combat operation. In order to do that, it takes sort of constant planning, and so we had been planning this for some number of weeks before we deployed the pool. Tammy.
What's this has been going on, you said, since April. What's been accomplished so far? For example, narcotics seized or drug labs destroyed, that sort of thing?
Well, I don't have a complete rundown on that, but I can give you sort of a flavor of what's happened. To give you an idea here, we think that between 15 and 20 air shipments have been disrupted or stopped as a result of this since April. We don't have good figures yet for what's been going on in the ground, but and I can't give you precise figures on destructions of labs, but there have been some lab destructions, and there have also local authorities have captured some people they believe to be involved in narco-trafficking, but I don't have a complete rundown on that. Bill.
Ken, to the aspect of the involvement of the U.S. Southcom forces, Have they engaged in any combat, any firefights? Have they actually done any air interdiction, force downs? And who are they cooperating with militarily?
Well, welcome back, first of all. First of all, it's not our job to get involved in combat operations or interdictions. What we are doing is assisting indigenous countries in the area who actually have the narco-traffickers on their territory. We're assisting them by providing surveillance, training, etc. But we aren't making the force downs ourselves. They're doing it. So the answer is no.
No, but which militaries are cooperating?
Well, as I said, there are about half a dozen countries: Peru, Colombia, Bolivia. There are a range of countries.
It's their militaries that are cooperating with Southcom, or Southcom is assisting. Is that correct?
There are law enforcement operations, and sometimes they're militaries. Yeah.
Is it a DoD operation or a Barry McCaffrey operation or a combination of both? Or who
Well,
else?
this was set up when General McCaffrey was still the commander-in-chief at Southcom. Tomorrow, General Wesley Clark, newly frocked four-star, will take over as the commander-in-chief in Southcom. General Shalikashvili is going down for the change of command ceremony. This has been planned for some time, but it's a Southcom operation. It's being run in connection with a number of U.S. agencies, including the Coast Guard, and the Department of Justice is involved. The Department of State's also involved. So it's not just a Defense Department operation.
Shall I take part, or rather observe any part of the exercise?
I don't believe so. I think he's just going down and coming back for the change of command. But I don't know that for a fact. From the schedule I've seen, it doesn't have him observing the operation in any way. And the press pool, as great as it would be to have him cover the change of command operation, was not deployed to do that. They will be in Peru when the change of command operation takes place in Panama. So they won't have anything to do with that. Yes.
You control the operation from Panama?
Sorry?
You control the operation from Panama? Who control all the operation?
Well, it's mainly the people providing the support are primarily Southcom. But as I said, there are a number of other U.S. agencies involved, and then a number of agencies of foreign governments. But basically, it's a Southcom. The U.S. coordination is being provided through Southcom.
So you have a center in Southcom that control and the coordination of activities in the 6 countries?
For this monitoring the activities in these 6 countries, I wouldn't say that we control the activities. These are sovereign states, and they conduct their own operations the way they want to. But many of the states are finding that narco-trafficking is a big problem for them, and they're interested in help in controlling it, and we're able to provide that help. But these are sovereign states, and they make their decisions about how to deploy their law enforcement forces as well as their armed services.
There needs to be an overall commander of laser strike, the operation, right? Do you know who that commander is?
I do not know precisely who is sitting in the chair on a day-to-day basis, but ultimately, to the extent that Southcom is providing support, it's the Commander-in-Chief of Southcom. Admiral Perkins has been who was the DSync, the Deputy Commander-in-Chief, has been the acting Commander-in-Chief. He's moving on to another assignment. As I said, General Clark's taking over.
Just in the verbiage, it's almost contradictory in that you say the U.S. is supplying a support role. But then, if that's a support role, how then in fact can we be, or a U.S. officer be in charge of an operation which is an overall support and operational role?
Well, our operation is support. That doesn't seem contradictory to me.
Let me put it another way, the other 6 countries, is somebody leading and
Well, I'll find out. There's obviously a team, and they're working together, just as NATO operates as a team when it does something in IFOR or something like that, and we will get you the names of the people on that team, including the U.S. person who's most directly involved in supervising it. Yes?
To what corps belong the American personnel involved in these operations?
To what units?
Yes.
I can't tell you that. We'll try to find out. I'm not sure we have a complete, it switches from time to time. I mean, there are naval forces involved and Coast Guard forces, which aren't even part of the military. Coast Guard forces are part of the Department of Transportation. There are obviously people from the Drug Enforcement Agency involved, and there are some American soldiers involved as well. Yes?
So that means that you move troops from the States to Panama to use...
No, we have troops.
In Panama, they are
Right.
part...
We have troops stationed in Panama. As you know, they're moving out of Panama to Miami, but there are troops stationed there. In addition, troops rotate through Panama from the U.S. from time to time, but I think we're using pretty much indigenous troops who are involved in Southcom.
Is the pool deployed in secrecy to your satisfaction, and how has the handling of the pool been since it's been down there? Any problems?
Well, the pool's been there less than 24 hours on the ground in Panama. It flew down on a C-130. I thought the deployment of the pool went excellently. I learned here that maybe we were too secretive, which is frequently not what we're accused of being in the Pentagon. But I thought it has deployed very smoothly, and all accounts we've gotten are that it's going well. Yes. Yes, Suzanne.
Do you have a readout on what the Secretary discussed with Secretary General Solana yesterday?
Well, it was a wide range of issues. First of all, Secretary General Solana is here primarily to meet with people on Capitol Hill, and he's been spending time up there meeting congressional leaders. You know, he's been at NATO for less than a year, and there's still many people he hasn't met on Capitol Hill. But they talked about how the I-4 mission is going. They talked about plans for NATO expansion. They talked about the importance of building on the decisions made at the last NATO meeting a week ago, or nearly a week, 10 days ago, I guess now, so-called 16+1 meeting where then Russian Defense Minister Grachev came, but one of the NATO tasks that will transcend the outcome of the Russian elections, that will transcend the Russian elections, is the need to build a strong relationship between NATO and Russia. And that's one of the areas that interests the Secretary and also interests Secretary General Solana. They talked about that.
Has the Secretary spoken with anyone in Russia?
I don't believe he has yet, no. Yes?
Will any of the operations with respect to laser strike take place in Panama?
I'm not aware that they are taking place in Panama, but I'll check that. Yes, Bill?
To an issue of some concern in Russia. Last week, Alexander Lebed came out in a press conference and said there had been an attempted coup by 5 generals loyal to Grachev. Later he toned that down, but this week, it's reported, this fact today, there were 7 generals, Russian generals fired by Yeltsin, along with 3 of his close people last week who were moved out. How does the Defense Department read these events concerning the Russian military and some discontent with Yeltsin?
Well, we read we're watching the events very closely, obviously. It's an election's going on. It's part of the Russian democratic process. It's a historic time for Russia. I'm glad you noted in your question that General Lebed changed his characterization of what had happened, and I think that the way it came out in the end, when all the dust had settled down, was that he was concerned that several generals and others in the Russian Defense Ministry were looking for a way to help General Grachev keep his job as defense minister. This is much different than a coup. It has to do more with protecting General Grachev's job, and that I don't know the details of what these people were discussing beyond what I've read in the press, but that's what I've read.
The Pentagon use this really then not ever as a coup, not ever to something to destabilize the Russian government or the system or to remove Yeltsin, only to...
Quite the opposite. What President Yeltsin has done, it seems to me, or what he said he's done publicly, is to remove people from his government whom he thought might be contemplating taking actions that would disrupt the elections. He's shown every determination to have the elections go forward on schedule and to be free and fair. And all our evidence is that the first round of the elections were in fact free and fair, and we don't have anything to suggest that the second round on July 3rd won't be free and fair. So we obviously applaud that.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm sorry. On the question of the chemical weapons.
Too late.
In Iraq. At least one soldier who was there at the time claims that there was no chemical weapons detection equipment on site, that the EOD teams made a quick and cursory search of the area, and then the bunker number 73 was blown. Does the Defense Department dispute that? And with what degree of certainty can you say, just in an effort to clarify what was said the other day, whether there were chemical weapons, or do you believe that there were chemical weapons? What is the level or the degree of confidence that you have that there were or were not chemical weapons present there?
Well, to answer your first question, we have been in contact with members of the 37th Engineering Battalion who detonated the bunkers at Camisea, and they have told us in considerable detail about the checking that went on with detectors before the bunkers were blown up. Now, I cannot tell you for sure that they went in to bunker 73, which is the bunker we believe contained rockets with chemical weapons in them. But they certainly surveyed the area, and they surveyed it before the bunkers were detonated, and then they also had detectors up while the bunkers were being detonated. So I did see the statement that was made by a soldier who was there at the time, and it disagrees fundamentally with the information we've collected from people who were actually, other people who were in the unit. This fellow was a driver, as I understand it, and he may have been in another area at the time the NBC teams were going through and making their survey.
And just in an effort to clarify what the degree of certainty is, or the lack of certainty is, as to whether chemical weapons were actually present in these shells with the polyethylene linings.
Well, the United Nations inspectors believe that there were chemicals chemical weapons in the bunker, and we have no reason to dispute them. We're not trying to be nitpicking about this. We're trying to be forward-leaning, and we're trying to look at all indications of what may have happened before, during, and after this war with chemical weapons. So we have no reason not to believe their conclusion. As I said, they reviewed their evidence over the spring in response to questions and concerns raised by the U.S. They went back and looked at the evidence they'd accumulated, and they were able to recheck, to go back into the area as part of their continuing monitoring of Iraqi compliance, and they did find these shell liners that are indicative of the presence of chemicals in rockets. But at no time did the U.S. inspectors or the UN inspectors, using detective devices, find traces of chemicals around this bunker. I want to be clear about that. What they found is circumstantial evidence, pretty good circumstantial evidence, that there were weapons containing chemicals in the bunker, but never a trace of chemicals at that particular bunker.
Could you say how many bunkers there were in this area, or how many were exploded by the Americans?
Well, there were about 100 bunkers, and it was in about a 25 square kilometer area. We, to the best of our information, believe that there were chemical weapons in one of the bunkers. Now, there were chemical weapons nearby, as I stated the other day, in an open pit and another storage area. Some of them had been buried and were under sand. But in terms of the bunkers, we think they were only in Bunker 73. Any other questions on this or other topics? Okay.